Well, good morning again.
Good morning.
Good morning. Always a pleasure to be with you in the Father's house. This morning is a very special morning as being Father's Day, and we think of our family and our fathers, and we think of the fathers that have gone before us as mentors, and it all brings us to this relationship we have with God, doesn't it? And what a beautiful relationship that can be when we work hard to be the children of God that God intends for us to be. This morning's message comes to us from the Gospel of Mark, the 4th chapter, the 35th through the 41st verse. And as we've already leaked in the early part of the, well, not a leak, but we talked about Jesus in the boat, in the storm. We're going to go ahead and catch you up on that. It is certainly the passage, Jesus calms the storm. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go to the other side, leaving the crowd behind." They took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were other boats with him. And a furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. And Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" And he got up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." And then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And they were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." It is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. Okay, before we get started, I have a little sidebar, and I have to admit to you, maybe like a little true confession. I've been told often that most of the messages that pastors give, most of the messages, it was more specific than that. You're not preaching to them, you're preaching to you. So as we go through this morning's message and we start to unravel all the things that are rolled up inside these passages, know that not only am I preaching to the choir, I'm probably open to some learning myself, but true confession time is over. Here's what I see that God is urging for us to uncover for this week. It might help to understand a little bit of the topography, the geography of their area, because you see the Sea of Galilee, which is right there where Jesus' ministry focused, is 680 feet below sea level. Now, think about that. Most of our community, most of Florida, is right at sea level. But the Sea of Galilee is 680 feet below the sea level. And beyond that, it's surrounded by hills. So it's this cup, the sides go up like this, and it makes these torrents of winds, and they come violent and unexpected. And so this is what was happening that day. They set sail, and the sunset was nice, and the storm and the seas were calm, and all of a sudden a wind blows up and a violent storm starts. Now, remember who Jesus is in the boat with. His disciples were mostly fishermen. They'd been earning their living. They'd been fishing on that lake, the Sea of Galilee. They'd been fishing there all of their lives. But this was a violent storm. They underestimated the weather. But they also underestimated Jesus. With our knowledge in this day and this time and the references we have and the works that other people have done, do we still underestimate the power of Jesus? Sometimes I think we do. In all of the things that this story brings out is Jesus needed to recoup, to get away, to catch his breath, kind of to regain our strength. Now, I found a reference from a Canadian professor of Concordia University in Montreal. And he calls this time that we're living in, he calls this time a recline in Western civilization. Now I said recline, not decline. But what does that mean? What does recline really mean? Laid back. I think it's a time when we can start to understand a little bit more of reclining by the symptoms of a civilization, a society that is reclining. So here's a couple of examples that might help us get there, because we are living in this culture where opposite things seem to be happening at the same time, but not necessarily in contradiction. So I have a question for you, for me. Do any of us know when it is time or how to say enough is enough? No more. I am overwhelmed. Just because we're hooked up to the internet doesn't mean that we need to continue to search things that are pertinent to our work or to our lives. And just because we are hooked up to the internet, must we check our email 4 or 5 times a day, even over the weekend? Just because we're connected in life, should we get an extra hour in our journey so that we have 1 hour less to drive tomorrow? Should we meld together business and family together so that we're more efficient, even on the meal hour? And when and where do we finally draw the line and declare to ourselves it's time for a rest? I'm certain I'm not talking to you. But Jesus demonstrates to us this certainty of his own self, this security of purpose. First, Jesus decides in that day, enough is enough. He sends them away at the end of that day. He realized that they had heard all that they needed to hear. He realized that he had already poured the glass full and it wouldn't make any difference if he overflowed it. There was still only as much water as they needed. He brought an abrupt halt to his teaching, so he and his disciples could set out for a new destination, a break in the routine, just get to somewhere else, a new sight, a new breath of fresh air, a new change in scenery. These decisions he made with supreme assurance. Because you see, Jesus is not worried of what's going on. He gets into the boat, he goes to the back, lays down in the stern of the boat with a cushion and falls asleep. He's not worried about what he will miss on the journey. He's not worried about the crowd he sent away. He was well assured that they had the nourishing images to chew on for some time from what he had already told them. So his decision to leave is immediately followed by the image of him asleep in the boat. He was at peace with himself and his mission. And he falls asleep at the drop of an oar. Resting goes against our grain, doesn't it? Because we don't see resting as a positive thing. We see resting sometimes as laziness, as wasteful, non-productive, idleness. We've been told if we want to get ahead, if we want to be successful, we need to stay afloat, keep our edge, remain competent. No time off, no vacations, hiatus, no downtime. Sometimes there isn't even anything to getting a good night's sleep. We wear ourselves thin, and we wear others out. It's kind of become a status symbol in our society. Rest is something we assign to wimps. Or could it be that we actually are too rattled, too nerdy to go to sleep? Because you see, it takes a certain amount of confidence, doesn't it, for us to finally put things away, turn off the lights, shut everything out. Ask a new mother. She won't leave her new baby until she is assured of everything being taken care of. How many times have you found yourself staring at the clock at 2 a.m. in the morning, even though your body's crying out, I'm totally exhausted? But don't worry, you're not alone. There are 70 million hardcore insomniacs in our country, and they're up pacing the floors as you're looking at your dial change from 1 minute to the next. And you lay there trying to catch up with all the things that you've decided for the day. You've closed the office doors, but you haven't closed them in your own heart and mind. You're trying to solve the problem of global warming, second guess the motives behind the teenagers in your house, or figuring out how you pay 2 months back bills with 1 month current salary. Sometimes falling asleep is just a challenge. Look at the products in our culture that are out there just for us who have a hard time getting to sleep. There are sleeping pills, there are herbal pills, there are sleep music, white noise machines, earplugs, ear shades, adjustable beds, water beds, air beds, and the list goes on and on and on of things that are there to help us get the rest that we need and to shut the world out and to shut our minds down. On the other hand, Jesus was willing to get into that creaky, leaky boat, letting someone else drive. He just curled up in the back on a cushion and fell asleep. His behavior said a lot to us. He was confident. He knew that he had done what he needed to do, and that he could relax in the sure knowledge that there was no power or principality that could ultimately undo the things that he had done. But you say, what good is that to us today, now? We know we're not divine, and Jesus was. We still lie awake some nights trying to drive out the demons, because somewhere we've been taught we need to fear them. The Christian calendar in 1078 had a special time of replenishment 3 different times of the year. They called it kind of a ketchup for your soul, not tomato ketchup. Where did that come from? Ketchup for your soul. There was one there was one connected to the wheat harvest, and that was at the end of the summer. There was one for the wine harvest, and then there was one just before the winter solace, when it was a time for sowing the seed. And Pope Gregory VII was the one that made them a permanent part of the calendar. Now, that would put 3 days of mandatory shutdown. I could deal with that. I don't think they're in our calendar today, but I could deal with 3 extra days a year just to kick back. And there are 3 things that we could learn to do if we put our minds and our hearts together and focused on where we would be going. If we could learn to trust. If we could learn to obey. And mostly important, we could learn to disengage. The trust is like Jesus snoozing in the storm. We can learn the power of God's divinity. We can We can count on that. Because what did Paul say? If God is for us, who can be against us? If God can sleep, then so can we. To obey, that second part, to obey, is to remind us that our ability to rest is directly related to our ability to obedience as children of God. We know that good parents teach their children that they need to rest, that they need to sleep, so they can become tall and healthy and grow into the adults that they desire to be. But we need to recognize that too. Resting is not the lazy way out. It is a God command for us to rest. And at the conclusion of creation, even God took a day and kicked back and put his feet up and slept in the back of the boat. This is an essential part of this covenantal relationship that we have with God. Look who's talking, right? Finally, we must learn to disengage. Jesus knew that sometimes it was necessary to get away so that he might be fully charged and really ready for what was coming later. When he said to them who were with him, his disciples, pass by on the other side. This week, Jesus' directive to pass by, to disengage once in a while, is a different way of looking at life, isn't it? So I found this prayer that we can close with, and I'm going to take just a piece of the end of it and see if it doesn't make sense in the here and now. Lord, may we be conscious of the Spirit's promptings, drawing us away to a secret place to abide in your shadow, that we might be refreshed and renewed. From this rest, let us rejoin our community with a sense of replenishment, which encourages and restores not only our souls, but those of our brothers and sisters. How grateful we are to you, O God, that you care so much to lovingly provide such needed space in our lives. We seek to pass into your presence still. In the shadow of the Lord, in a secret place with the Lord. That's what makes the rest happen. The rest happen. And all the children say,
Amen.
Amen.